Well, I think the thing I'm talking about is being great at communicating today. I think what's very obvious in my corporate world is that people are obsessed with yesterday. They still want to do a television ad as if anyone on earth watches them. And by the way, just to give you context, $80 billion worth of media being bought for television, network, and cable ads, let alone the money that's being spent on making the ads. I think the place this kind of room gets kicked up on is why last year in the hype of NFTs and the things that were happening, the place where I was trying to stop a lot of friends were going to was the metaverse because the humans weren't there. This room, this energy, this DNA doesn't get caught up on believing in yesterday. It is believing in tomorrow too soon. So the place not to invest in is we are aware that these technologies are in place, but pay attention to what the consumer's actually doing versus what you'd like them to do because you wrote a check, which is just a killer. And I appreciate the reaction from several of you. The place that is just so obvious to me is like, you wrote a check and now you want it to be true. It's much better to be thoughtful before you write the check if it is true. And I think when you list the things that I've invested in, I became a worse investor over time. In the beginning, when I was writing checks, all I was doing was based on like, oh, this is happening now, and like people don't see it. And then over time, you make a bunch of good investments, you get fancy, and you think you're good at something. And I had to recalibrate back, and now I try to, if I'm writing a check, it's like, it's actually happening. Not, it might happen, it could happen. And so, you know, people are gonna get caught on VR being too early. People are gonna get caught on a lot of things. The other thing is people get caught up in headlines and they're not actually educated in the craft. I am uncomfortably bullish on, I think of AI like oxygen. It's done, it's a foregone conclusion. And I'm putting in a ton of work to understand it, but I've been very patient in writing checks because it's no different than when I was bullish on social networks when I saw the MySpace thing. I don't know if a lot of you, well, I mean, looking at the crowd and knowing some faces here, you'll remember, it wasn't MySpace and Facebook. It was MySpace, Facebook, Orchid in Brazil, Tim. You know, it was High Five, it was Tag World. We had niche social networks. Everybody remember Dogster? We needed a social network for our dogs. Like, you know, and so what's gonna happen right now is over the next 24 months, the enormous amount of checks and money and time and energy people are gonna put into AI companies where the decision maker, A, doesn't even understand the technology as well as they'd like to think, and B, doesn't realize that almost all of them are commoditized and that the people that are actually gonna win are gonna be far more based on the operators that drive the car than the car that they're building. And so I would say that people need to be very thoughtful during this next half decade because there's a lot of new, really substantial technologies, but just because it's happening doesn't mean it's gonna work out. It's similar to why in the height last year of NFTs, I started going completely the other way and making videos saying 99% of these things are going to zero. The macro of an NFT is right, but the individual projects weren't. No different than sports cards, we were just talking, like sports cards or art are good investments. The problem is, for the 7 to 50 people that in this town 80 years ago that were smart and bought Jackson Pollock, there was thousands of other people that bought Jackson Schmollick and lost a ton of money. Like, yeah, Michael Jordan's rookie card is worth a lot of money, but 99% of athletes are not. 99% of AI startups are gonna fail. And so I think people need to be thoughtful.
I literally had a friend come to me 10 years ago and said, we need to invest in water, it's the future. Well, of course it is, but it's water, just like AI is.
That's exactly right. But I think, you know, like, this is where we get caught even when we're seasoned and good. We get excited, you're like, oh, I like this, I know this space is happening. Just have to be, in times like this, especially, and I'm sure people have noticed this, the speed in which these companies are popping up is extraordinary. Like, you know, I look at something that, like AI creative is extremely fascinating to me. But the second, like I spent 5 minutes a year ago looking at Midjourney, there was like 20 other competitors I didn't even know existed. And like, by the way, there's 20 popping up a day right now. Because the technology itself is fascinating in the speed in which it can matter. So I just think people just need to be thoughtful during this time.
Yeah. Last 2 lightning round questions for you. You know, you mentioned a little bit again ahead of your skis, or a little bit of, you know, a little bit of maybe hubris that we all kind of see ourselves in when we have some good investments or good whatever. How do you view luck? I mean, going back to the last battle, I just love your grit, I love your hustle. Are you like a chance favors the prepared guy, or how do you make your own luck, or is it something different?
The way I look at luck is based on how the person that's deploying the word is weaponizing it.
Oh man, that was good.
Well, let's talk it through. Like, what do I think about luck? I was traded for wheat. I was born in the Soviet Union. The way I got to this country where entrepreneurship is put on a pedestal versus what happened to both of my grandfathers, which was by being entrepreneurs in Soviet Russia, they spent meaningful time in jail. So I get here and get to stand on fancy stages and hang out with cool people, and my mom's dad spent 10 years in jail for selling like sausage for tile. So what do I think about luck? I think it's fucking real. Like, you know, your mom and dad had sex at the right moment. That's why you're even sitting here. How can anyone understand it's a variable? On the flip side, all my friends and acquaintances who sit around and do nothing and watch cable television news and make themselves depressed 24 hours a day and produce nothing and do nothing and then decide to deploy luck on their friends or contemporaries as a weapon to prove something to themselves based on what they're not doing. I don't believe in that version of luck. So I think luck is real, but I think it depends on the context. I think everyone here is lucky because a million things happened for you to get here, including avoiding disease and so many things. Like that it's the human spirit. But when people look at anyone who actually works and says they're lucky, like LeBron was lucky the way he was born. You know how many hours of work went into that finished product? And you know how many people were born with that same capability? So I think you have to be careful in the context of how you deploy it. Buying the Jets thing has been there since 3rd grade. I want to continue to try to pull it off. It's a big part of my journey, but I think I started to understand it in my late 30s, early 40s, which was like, oh, I love my craft. I've always loved being an entrepreneur. I always wanted to do business. I guess even at a young age, I subconsciously understood if I make a huge goal, I'll always be playing. You know, I think I'm a counter puncher. And what I mean by that is, I really don't know the answer to that question. I know that I like being active as a business person, as a communicator. I'm really in a small group of people that really the thing they love is also a thing they ended up being good at. So I'm incredibly driven by gratitude. You know, I'm in the life cycle where I'm like, you know, I want to be thoughtful about like what makes me happy and be more thoughtful about my choices. I think one of the things, I love the last panel. For the people in here that are built on grit or come from the dirt, or I really love that statement of like not being impressed. That happened to me. I was an atrocious student, and it wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I'm like, wait a minute, I can kill all these Harvard fuckers. You know, like so I understood that, you know, but I think one of the downsides of being driven by grit and like basically willing it to success is maybe you're not as selective, you know, like, you know, I've built in a lot of ways where I'm just like, I'm doing everything always at 100. I think, you know, I want to be a little bit more selective, but the reality is I know that I just want to keep, you know, cultivating relationships through the context of business that leads to great friendships, still play my game. Like I desperately want to die at my desk. And what I mean by that is like, I don't know what to do if I'm not like being active. Like I don't understand being 91 and like, I don't want to fish, you know, so I kind of anticipate always doing, but like, you know, I just want to do stuff and then I want to communicate about it with the hope, you know, I'm incredibly affected by the way I was parented. And I think when I analyze why do I put myself so out there, I realized that the words out of predominantly my mom, but a good part of my dad, the words that were said to me formed how I rolled. And I think there's a lot of intriguing advice, both from parenting and society, that is just wildly not practical to the truth of the situation. And so I'm motivated by doing stuff and then communicating about it with the hope that it impacts some people positively.